So, good evening and welcome to the Art Deco Society UK's webinar, Preserving Our Seaside Art Deco Heritage. We are fortunate today to be joined by four speakers, all offering their own perspectives on this fascinating topic. We have Dr. Kathryn Ferry, Alan Brodie, Karen Averby, and Nigel Wilson. And we're so excited to have you with us tonight. I'm Angharad Hart, the Art Deco Society UK's Preservation Committee Chair and your webinar host for this evening. I know that we are all eagerly awaiting tonight's talk, but I just have to go over a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So the first thing to say is that we now have auto-generated captions, which are available if you click the CC Live transcription button on the bottom of your screen and then show subtitles. This is the webinar format that we're using today, which is slightly different from the regular Zoom meeting. For example, you can only see me and tonight's speakers, but we can't see or hear you. So feel free to relax without having to worry about anybody seeing you in your pajamas this evening. We'll be following up the presentation today with a Q&A session with our speakers. So if you would like to ask any questions, please pop these in the Q&A section at any time, which is just at the bottom of your screen, and we will address the questions at the end. You can also use the chat function if you'd like to share any nice thoughts with the group or raise any issues that you may have with sound or video, and we will try and assist you as best we can. As always, please be respectful and thoughtful with your questions and your comments. So that's it for the housekeeping, and we can now move on to the part that you've all been patiently waiting for. So before we introduce tonight's speakers, we would like to offer a little background on this evening's topic, preserving our seaside Art Deco heritage. So whilst I do that, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Kathryn Ferry, to share her presentation so that we're ready to go afterwards. And I will stop sharing just so that doesn't cause any issues.
Yes, thank you. Oops, sorry.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, so seaside resorts have long been favourite places to visit, from their origins in the 18th century with resorts like Margate and Scarborough as places to take the sea waters, to popular tourist destinations after the arrival of the railways in the 19th century. Promenades, piers and pleasure facilities soon emerged to provide facilities and amenities, laying the foundations for the modern seaside experience. A large part of the seaside character we are familiar with today took shape in the interwar years, the 1920s and 1930s being just a relatively short time, but one which we recognise with a distinct character from striking modernism, our own beloved Art Deco. As we may know, Art Deco style began with exclusivity. The Paris Exposition of 1925 showcased luxurious materials and meticulous craftsmanship, largely accessible only to an elite. But architects such as Robert Mallet Stevens and Le Corbusier advocated for simpler, affordable designs, and so the style trickled down into buildings like cinemas and theatres, and of course at the seaside. Glamour and modernity became accessible, with relatively new materials like aluminium and concrete and plastic, references to ancient cultures, bold geometry and new technology. Art Deco was a thoroughly modern architectural style. Couple that with social life of the 1920s and 30s, with its mass tourism, modernised transport networks, outdoor leisure, and a growing belief in the health benefits of sea air and sunshine, and the blurring of indoor and outdoor space, it was a perfect match, and seaside resorts flourished. As glamorous, sun-soaked recreation was embraced, the new architectural style of Art Deco became prominent, with sweeping curves, streamlined forms, and nautical flourishes that echoed the elegance of ocean liners, connecting buildings to the open sky and the sea. Marine Court in St. Leonards-on-Sea mirrors the flowing profile and tiered balconies of a liner's superstructure, and other notable examples are Morecambe's Midland Hotel, opened in 1933, and the Delaware Pavilion in Bexhill 2 years later, and of course, the Lido. New Brighton's open-air bathing pool had over 1 million visitors in 1934, and Saltdean Lido opened in 1938 with its dramatic glass facade and sweeping sun decks. We also have Dreamland in Margate and developments at Frinton-on-Sea and Seaton-Carew bus station, as well as smaller structures such as shelters and even benches. Art Deco shapes not only the look of seaside towns, but also how people experience them via modernity, glamour, and pleasure. However, the style became unfashionable from the 1950s, when many buildings of the Art Deco period were demolished and the style became synonymous with dilapidation and a bygone era, not helped by the popularity of overseas travel and holidays from the later 20th century. Seaside buildings haven't tended to be designed taking into account the climate and conditions of the coast. Many are elevated or are directly sea-facing, and so we see very visible physical deterioration of these structures, many of which were ineffective in terms of longevity from the start. So we will now hear from our 4 speakers who will offer insights into the whys and wherefores of our Art Deco seaside heritage, looking at the issues and perhaps even solutions as to how to celebrate and preserve our Art Deco heritage, followed by the Q&A at the end. So now, without further ado, thank you so much, Kathryn. Over to you. And before that, I will just read a short bio to give people a little bit of background. So Dr. Kathryn Ferry is an author and historian specialising in the seaside. Her latest book is 20th Century Seaside Architecture, and her other titles include publications on beach huts and butlins. She is a founder member of the Seaside Heritage Network, and we will add a link in the chat for those who would like to find out more about the Seaside Heritage Network shortly. Thank you, Kathryn, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I am going to start with a sort of sad part, really, because I'm going to be looking at 3 cases of seaside heritage that are currently under threat. And I'm going to deal with them sort of chronologically, speaking through the 1930s. I'm going to come back to this one at the end because it's chronologically the last. So I am going to start on the Yorkshire coast with the Whitby West Cliff lift, where locals are campaigning to save it. I'm very grateful to Bob Walton for alerting me to this and updating me on the current situation. So what you see here are the top station and the bottom station. The lift opened at Whitsun in 1931. And as you can see, it's not your conventional funicular kind of cliff lift that you might be used to if you've been to nearby Scarborough or Saltburn. This is not the Victorian type. This was an electric lift that ran through a specially constructed shaft 112 feet deep. So it sort of claims to being Art Deco really come from that bottom entrance to the tunnel there, which is relatively minor, I will grant you, but it belongs to that 30s period, and it's significant for being rather different in its construction because it was dug out like a coal mine. And actually the council got money from the Unemployment Grants Committee to fund this work, which actually meant the employment of local fishermen during the winter. So it's quite significant in local history. 40 men were employed over 3 shifts a day to dig out the shaft. And then Armstrong's of Newcastle, the engineering contractors, lowered rings of cast iron into the shaft using the same technique as was used on the London Underground at the time, so that the connecting segments made a tube, basically, which weighed over 200 tons. Then 500 more tons of cast iron were used to line the tunnel that you can see on the right, which connects the lift shaft to the promenade. And I think that sort of Art Deco step detailing on that bottom entrance is really sort of a nod to the fact that this is quite a modern take on the cliff lift. And the tunnel was also used as a shelter for people when it rained, and for decades has been used for storing beach huts and deck chairs over the winter. So another view here, a close-up of the top station. It's not that much to look at, but it is pretty original because there is an account of the works in the Yorkshire Evening Post in April 1930 that stated the motor room for the lift will be built of sand-faced brick with a red tiled roof supported on 8 brick columns. And it will be of artistic design in keeping with its surroundings. The electric motors for driving the lift will derive their power from the town's supply. And I think that's quite an interesting point because it was deferring to its Victorian neighbours. You can see in the bottom right, so the Victorian shelters that were pre-existing. Those, in fact, are listed now. So I think it's a kind of, the design is a sort of exercise in municipal subtlety, really. The cliff lift closed in 2022 because of concerns over corrosion and water ingress. And the repair costs are estimated to be about 5.5 million. So the council chose closure and running a bus down the cliff. If you look in the top right-hand slide image, you'll see why the cliff is so necessary and why local people are actually campaigning. And 5,600 of them have so far signed the petition to save the lift, because the council decided without consultation that they wanted to infill the structure rather than pay the money. The idea was to permanently infill it, which would mean it wouldn't be able to be used again. And there are very real concerns about accessibility and inclusivity. So over the summer, the Seaside Heritage Network supported a listing application to Historic England for this. Unfortunately, it was turned down on the basis that the lift wasn't nationally significant enough, though I do think it is a unique design. But in the meantime, the council has deferred making a decision till March of next year to see how much water comes in, if it does, over the winter. So really, this is one to watch that space. And if you're interested to sign the petition and add your voice to the cause to try and save this for historic reasons, but also for the fact that it was a useful and functional thing that with the right attention could hopefully be repaired. So next, I am going to take you to Eastbourne. This is a listed structure, the central bandstand, but that doesn't necessarily make it safe from harm. So I've got 3 images here for kind of context, really. So the building I'm talking about is the one on the right-hand side, which was opened on the 5th of August 1935. It was designed by Leslie Rosevere, who was the borough surveyor at the time, borough architect. And it was enough of an attraction for it to appear centre stage in a railway poster. And you have to imagine yourself back in that era when there wasn't really recorded music. So communal outdoor music was really important, and it was something expected on holiday. People wanted to take part in these big open air concerts, and there had been that tradition from the Victorian period. So on the left, you'll see the sort of cast iron birdcage bandstand that pre-existed, and that's what the central bandstand of 1935 was designed to replace. But actually, the year before that was built, you'll see the one on the bottom left there. That's at the other end of the promenade, or was, I should say, the Redoubt bandstand, which opened in 1935. Same designer, same architects team. That one's sadly demolished. So the central bandstand then, that was built over the beach like its predecessor. It was part of a bigger enclosure, so the sea didn't come up underneath it like you see in that Victorian picture. 9 massive iron pillars were sunk into the bedrock beneath the sand to support this structure. And then there was an enclosure of concrete decks and roofs built on a steel framework. And it is that steel framework that is the problem now. And I think we're going to hear about some of the issues around corrosion in the marine environment a bit later on. So if you go to Eastbourne and look at the bandstand now, this is a picture that I took in December last year. And it was heralding phase 1 of the exciting restoration. As you'll see, it was supposed to open again in 2023. Well, that didn't happen. And there are big hoardings up around the area where the structure is being deemed unsafe. Then this year, a new, cheaper plan had been put forward because the council failed to get the funding that they required. So if I show you what the bandstand looked like until relatively recently, we've got the band area with its beautiful azure sort of shallow dome here, very much Art Deco touches in the detailing underneath it, but otherwise more classical references that sort of are certainly there in the 1920s, and these colonnades here with these columns, it's all faced in Carter's ceramic marble by Carter's of Poole, Poole pottery. And these are the bits under threat, these two covered areas. And so unfortunately, what the local council want to do is this, which is basically to remove all of those covered seating areas where the corrosion exists and just create this very plain seating area. No provision has been made for after demolition of this area. There's no plan for reinstatement currently, and that is why the Eastbourne Society and the 20th Century Society have objected to these plans. And currently the council, I believe, is waiting to hear from Historic England and their engineer that consultation about the viability of replacement. But it is arguably one of the best known buildings in the town, and this proposed scheme feels sort of depressingly lazy to me. The architects have suggested this work, by clearing the trouble areas, would allow for later schemes to sort of update the bandstand. What they offer in regard to that in design terms is this kind of thing. And I'll leave you to decide whether that is a fair trade-off for the historic fabric that will be lost. Maybe there'll be some comments about that, but the works are actually going before the planning committee at 6 o'clock on Monday, the 17th of November. So that is literally a few days' time, next Monday. And several organisations in the town, including the Friends of the Seafront and the Meads Community Association, are encouraging their members to turn out. So it might be quite an interesting planning meeting, and do keep an eye out, because that the outcome of that will surely be known online relatively soon. So thank you very much to John Minnis for keeping me updated on this particular proposal. And then finally, because I am running through these, we only have our allotted time, so do look these up if you're interested. But my final example is this one in Norfolk, the Ocean Room at Galston, the sister resort of Great Yarmouth. I'm delighted to say there is a whole team of people looking out for this building, so I want to thank all of them for information about it. So in 1937, the council began to discuss the improvement of the old band enclosure that was previously on the site to provide an outdoor swimming pool, dance hall and sunbathing lawns. So as we've already heard, these were the sort of key attractions of the 1930s at the seaside, and every resort had to have these, certainly had to have a Lido. So the job of designing this was given to the borough engineer, S.P. Thompson. Again, it's the borough architect engineers, like at Eastbourne and arguably at Whitby too, I think. These people were highly important in designing buildings for their local communities, and they're rather undervalued now. You can see the architect's perspective or view of the scheme on the right-hand side, and it's got these elements to it. So there's the diagonal Lido there, and the large circular building, which was called the Floral Hall. That's the dance room, that's the dance hall. And if you can see on the far right, there was another circular building, very streamlined, rather sweet, which was the plant room. It's very rare to have a dance hall as an integral element of a Lido scheme. Lots of Lidos had cafes, but they rarely have this kind of entertainment space. Lots of Lidos have been demolished. We've talked about fashions changing. This one went in 1993, but significantly, the Floral Hall did survive. And here are some original drawings of that building from the Norfolk Record Office. So many thanks to Henry Kelf and Caroline Jones for going to photograph them. You'll see the streamlined circular designs here, large areas of poolside glazing on the left-hand side here, so offering views of the swimming pool. There's Art Deco detailing of the brick piers in between those, and a lovely sort of wave pattern at the cornice level. You can just about see here and here. It was an attractive building. It has undergone some changes over the years, and that is an inevitable consequence of remaining in use. And that is a problem with a lot of seaside buildings when you're trying to get them listed, but it is largely intact. It opened in 1939, and dances were regularly attended by about 500 people or so. So it, over the years, did keep pace with changes in entertainment. So bands like Cream, Pink Floyd, and Blur, and recently Rag and Bone Man appeared in what had become the Ocean Room disco in our nightclub in 1975. So it has a long and cherished history among local people. Very sadly, as with a lot of hospitality venues, COVID really caused an issue, and the building closed in 2024 when the property reverted to its council owners. Earlier this year, they put the building on the market, and this sale really sparked fears among local people about what might happen to the structure. So much so that 3 separate listing applications have been submitted to Historic England. I think that obviously had the pool survived, then it would have had a stronger case for listing because it would be much more in its original design. But in terms of assessing its national significance, it's quite important because it was known as a floral hall. Floral halls were a particular type of building linked to the seaside, and they started off, actually, having said they're linked to the seaside, inland. So I give you the Floral Hall in Covent Garden on the top left there in the 1850s. And they had a kind of Edwardian moment. The Floral Hall in Covent Garden was both a flower market and an entertainment venue. But when it transferred to the seaside, it was just really for entertainment, but with lots of sort of greenery hanging around. So Scarborough had an Edwardian floral hall. In the interwar period, there were 6 of these floral halls built, so named, but only 2 of those survive. Southport from 1932, which you see top right, is long gone. The one at Belfast Zoo in the bottom right, sorry, that does survive, but it is currently derelict. And it's the only other one with Galston to have survived to this day. Both of them circular. Is that coincidence? Probably. So here you see the Ocean Room as it currently looks in its exterior and its interior, this huge circular dance floor, which is quite a surprising thing. So if Historic England recognise its significance nationally as one of very few remaining floral halls, it may have a hope of being listed, but we await that decision. The council has now settled on a proposed developer to take this forward, but we don't know what the plan is. And so that's really where local people are very worried about what is in store for the building until we really know. So keep an eye out again online for local news reports about this one, but be advised that there are lots of people who care about it. So that is my very quick rundown of those 3 cases. If you want to know more about seaside heritage across the 20th century, that is my book. But I think it's probably time for me to hand over now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much there. So yes, if you'd like to stop sharing, that would be brilliant. And I'd like to invite Alan to start sharing his presentation, please. And whilst you do that, I will give a little bit of background. So Alan Brodie is a visiting fellow at Bournemouth University and a founding member of the Seaside Heritage Network. He is the author of many books on the seaside, including England's Seaside Resorts, The Seafront, and England's Seaside Heritage from the Air, as well as books on Margate, Weymouth, Blackpool, and Weston-super-Mare. Alan has also co-written a 4-volume history of travel and tourism between 1700 and 1914, and Tourism and the Changing Face of the British Isles. Other books have been studies of England's prisons, England's military heritage, transport heritage, and a catalogue of medieval stone sculpture. Alan has also written papers on subjects as varied as the Georgian seaside, the Roman fort at Pevensey, and Birmingham's 1930s airport. So thank you. Over to you, Alan.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I want to talk today about a block of buildings right in the centre of Bournemouth, their varied stories of their creation, and the various sort of later lives they've had. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Some are thriving, some are hanging on, and some are desperately in need of a new sort of secure future. This slide contains none of the buildings I'm going to talk about, but it's a shameless plug for a walking tour that Kathryn and I ran last summer, and a printed version of the walking tour, because Bournemouth is, perhaps people don't realise this, has a very rich Art Deco heritage of shops, flats, houses, cinemas, offices, hotels, and beachfront places. And see, these are some of the places that I will not be talking about today. What Bournemouth doesn't have is any of the kind of the famous iconic sort of star buildings, if you like, the Delaware Pavilion, Marine Court, Saltdean, Lido, and the MC Court, Brighton. And it doesn't have a sort of a big housing development, a bit like, well, there's a fairly small one at Weston, but there's sort of clusters of sort of modernist sort of housing development. But what it does have is this sort of central block that is by and large intact today, that dates almost entirely from the 1920s, 1930s. I'm having mouse trouble. This is the block I'm talking about here. If you see the block between Westover Road and Hinton Road there, I'm going to dip into the block just for one building between Hinton Road and Upper Hinton Road. And I'll start with the pavilion, which was built in this sort of parkland area, which really is there at the beginning of the story. And this is an aerial view of the block here that I'm going to be talking about. And it's originally a set of Victorian villas, which are very rapidly redeveloped in the 1920s and 1930s. So sticking with the 1907 map on the left, this is the 1923 map. We've got the Art Deco bandstand has appeared in the park, and a little bit of development at the left-hand, the sort of northern end of the block. If I then go through to the mid-1930s, this Aerofilms photograph, you can see most of the key buildings are there. There's a gap in the setup there where my mouse is, which will be what I will call the ABC cinema later. There's another gap there, which is where the Palace Court Hotel is, where the Premier Inn is now based. I'm going to have to put on a different light, I'm afraid. Apologies for that. It's the wonders of modern technology when you've got remote controlled lighting and on timers, etc. So that's mid-1930s. And if I leap forward to a 1941 map, you can now see that that entire block is complete. Just to the south of it, you have the pavilion, which I'll talk about in a minute, and most of the redevelopment of the buildings between Hinton Road and Upper Hinton Road have taken place. That's a postcard produced by the Palace Court Hotel showing some of the key attractions, which is labelled, most of which date from the late 1920s and the 1930s. And I'll start by talking about the pavilion in the centre left, and then talk about the Regent Cinema, the Westover Ice Rink, the Palace Court Hotel, and the Majestic Garage, as well as one or two other buildings. This sort of not the very first building in the block, but the key one was the pavilion, which opened in 1929 at the cost, stupendous cost of £250,000. It had been designed back in 1923 by G. Wyville Hume and Shirley Knight, and it uses a mixture of red brick and stone in a kind of simplified classical style. It faces the pier behind, and at the front of it, so the view on the left is sort of looking towards the pier and the seaside, and then the other end is looking onto Westover Road. And then you can see on the right, top right, the Lucullus room, which was the a la carte first-class restaurant. There was also a smaller second-class restaurant. And then bottom right, you can see the upper concert hall with its own Compton organ and seating for 1,600 people. And this was built specifically to house Bournemouth's Municipal Orchestra. And internally, it's a mixture of ancient Greek and Egyptian motifs with a mixture of sort of Art Deco. So it's very much sort of at that earlier sort of part of the story. And this is one of the great things about this block of buildings, is you're going to see kind of the range of sort of styles within the broad church of Art Deco. In 2007, the theatre underwent a £12 million restoration programme, making a modernised, multi-purpose and accessible venue that is still now at the heart of the town's entertainment offer. And this is the key sort of building that sort of anchors the development, if you like, in this part of Bournemouth. And at the heart of much of this subsequent work from the late 1920s onwards is this man, Arthur John Seale, A.J. Seale. During the 1930s, he alters the face of central Bournemouth with a range of modernist buildings that were praised for their freshness and originality. He was born in Derby and trained as an architect there before moving to Bournemouth in 1910. After service in the First World War, he went into partnership with another architect, Philip Hardy, and that lasted until 1933, when he set up on his own the firm of A.J. Seale and Partners. And interestingly, in 1933, when Seale and Hardy split, they both actually set up their offices in this area in new purpose-built buildings, and I'll be showing these two offices in a few minutes. So this is what I'm calling the former Odeon Cinema. This is just opposite the pavilion that I began with. And it begins life as the Regent Theatre, a sort of 1920s version of Italian Renaissance style, with this sort of facade decorated with faience tiles and this tall loggia in front of the upper floor. It was designed for the Provincial Cinematograph Theatres Limited by William Edward Trent, but it was assisted locally by the firm of Seale and Hardy. The original auditorium had a capacity of 2,267 people with an orchestra pit and a Wurlitzer organ. And the Beatles actually performed there more than once. This was this is the 1963 residency here, the poster. And I never thought anybody would say this, but as I'll mention later, the Beatles actually stayed in the Premier Inn while they were performing there. More of that to come. It was refurbished to make 2 screens in 1969 and then was split into a 6-screen Odeon cinema in 1986. It closed in 2017 and unfortunately still in search of a new function and occupier. Just to the left of it is of the former Odeon Cinema is the former Westover ice rink. Ice rink above a car showroom. I mean, that's just an extraordinary combination. I don't think you would come across today. This is a work by Seale and Hardy, embracing Art Deco with the distinctive sort of ziggurat-shaped windows. And you can see on the top right there the 10,000 square foot ice rink, which was built over the car showroom, which you can see more clearly in the bottom right. And this was used by the general public, but it was also location for gala nights when they would put on sort of special shows. And at the bottom there, the Gay Vienna one is the program from 1934. And the ice show ran up until 1939 and restarted in 1947, and carried on without missing a year until 1980. However, by 1991, the rink's owners said it had become unviable, and despite petitions, protests, and a deputation to Bournemouth Council, it closed. Now, the sort of main function within the building is as a gym. And a little bit further to the left of this building was the Westover Super Cinema. It had this sort of stunning concave Art Deco facade, very narrow one with an illuminated central fin. This opened in 1937, and if you like, the the facade onto Westover Road was very narrow, but then you went out and into a much larger sort of block behind. And you can see the sort of stunning Art Deco facade, and then behind this very impressive auditorium that was 2,500 sort of seats. Renamed the ABC in 1958, it was divided into two screens and then 1969 and closed in 2017. And the last time I heard, there was a plan to turn it into flats, but I'm not uncertain. I think it's a bit uncertain what the future of that proposal is. But just to sum up, we've seen in the pavilion, the two cinemas and the ice rink, you've seen possibly sort of around 10,000 people per night could be sort of contained in these sort of entertainment venues. One of the sort of new arrivals in the interwar years was the motor car. We've seen the car showroom, but between the Odeon and the Palace Court Hotel was a multi-storey garage, one of the very earliest in Britain. This is a shot of the Motor Max garage of 1932, designed by Seal and Hardy. This steel-framed six-storey car park was designed for 900 cars on 13 staggered levels. The original Hinton Road facade you can see on the right-hand side is strikingly plain but decorated with faience tiles and retained its original metal frame windows. Now, the other side of the garage, facing onto Westover Road, was converted into hotel accommodation, but the rear half here, Hinton Road, remained in use until a couple of years ago and was always a favourite spot where I like to park. What lies ahead for this structure since it closed? I have lost touch with any proposals that might be coming forward. Which brings me to the proper, full, original hotel in the block. I call it the Premier Inn. It's originally the Palace Court Hotel, which opened in 1935, and this was by the local firm of A.J. Seal and Partners. The ground floor was originally shops with a members club, bar and restaurant above, and 70 hotel rooms with the streamlined sun-trap balconies and featuring private bathrooms. The top 5 floors were actually flats with kitchenettes, but the residents could also order meals while in the meals from the hotel dining room while they were staying in the flats. I mentioned the Beatles, and in 1963 the Beatles stayed in the Palace Court Hotel because they were playing the Residency just along the road. They actually had this photograph taken in the Palace Court Hotel in a corridor, blacked out sort of corridor, and just with this lighting. And this was for their second album. And that photograph was taken on the 22nd of August, 1963 by Robert Freeman. If we come to the back, the Hinton Road side of this block, we find sort of smaller sort of buildings. But as I mentioned, A.J. Seal and Philip Hardy, their partnership split in 1933. And A.J. Seal built Palace Court Chambers there, you can see on the left, with a view to using the upper floors as his offices. And you can see here it's in a state of sort of, it's not occupied, it's in a reasonable state, although it looks a bit sort of drab. But if you look on the very left-hand side of the image, you can see on the angled rising stairs of the staircase to the upper floors there. And then in the middle, a rather sort of more modest building just on the other side of Hinton Road is the office that Philip Hardy moved into in the mid-1930s. And in the third small building in this block is the former Little Theatre of 1931, later known as the Palace Court Theatre. And behind that sort of dark glass is a sort of with 3 steps sort of Art Deco windows, a sort of a triplet of windows there. This is a good news story because that's a slightly older photograph, but taken while the auditorium was actually being restored and revitalised by the Arts University of Bournemouth. So I think what's interesting about Bournemouth in this block is that we've got an almost entire set of interwar buildings, uh, perhaps the majority still in use, although some underused. But where else would you find that a garage has been converted into a hotel accommodation? But as you've seen, there's still sort of a series of sort of issues, a series of unoccupied buildings that really need to be sort of reloved and got to know again. And I want to sign off again by randomly three more pictures of buildings that Kathryn and I included in our walking tour, but were not within the block. And just to sort of advertise that Bournemouth has a fantastic Art Deco heritage, most of which is still sort of thankfully intact, large parts still in use, and hopefully next year Kathryn and I will be running our Art Deco walking tour again, and we'd like to invite you all to come along and enjoy the sights of Bournemouth. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. That reminds me of several lovely summer days spent down in Bournemouth looking at the architecture there. Brilliant. Thank you. So our next speaker is Karen. So if you could kindly share your screen, that would be excellent. Karen, can I just check that you're with us and able to hear me? Okay, Nigel, are you able to hear me?
I can hear you. Yes,
Okay.
Angrid. Yes,
Should we
yes.
move on and we'll
Um,
the order slightly?
by all
Um,
means, I
okay.
will jump in and
Thank you.
then
If you
let's
wouldn't
see
mind
if we
moving.
can get this one up and running.
Thank you. Whilst you work on that, I will give you a brief introduction, if that's okay.
Yeah, please,
So,
thank you.
Nigel Wilson is a semi-retired structural engineer who has specialised in the later part of his career in repair and conservation of old and listed buildings. He has worked with clients such as University of Cambridge and the National Trust and similar organisations responsible for the protection of heritage buildings in the Cambridge region and East of England areas. In recent years, he has developed a keen interest in the Art Deco period, in the construction and repair of buildings and their many decorative forms. He has recently joined the Art Deco Society Preservation Committee to assist in construction-related matters, and we're very lucky to have you. So thank you very much, Nigel. Over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Angrid. Good evening, everybody. As Angrid says, I trained as a civil engineer, practiced as a structural engineer for more than 40 years. Some of my colleagues often say, well, you're still practicing, Nigel, aren't you? But there we are. I am going to be talking more about construction. You've heard a lot of history. I'll touch on a bit of history tonight, but I would like to deal a little bit more with how these buildings are constructed. I will be talking about three buildings: Saltine Lido, Island Hotel and the Midland Hotel. I think a couple of these that Karen was going to touch on earlier, but we may be crossing over on some of the things we say. A little bit about the title. Why do iconic buildings sometimes fail? Well, iconic buildings, we've heard a lot about those wonderful Art Deco buildings at the seaside this evening, and I will touch on some of those, of course. But sometimes fail is the particular aspect that I would like to talk about. And in essence, sometimes failure of buildings is often seen as well, that's falling down, isn't it? But no, it's not. Buildings fail because they begin to crumble, they begin to deflect, they begin to settle into the ground, and they're not particularly usable. As a consequence of that, they do tend to be cast aside and become unused. So just moving on swiftly because time is limited, a little bit about construction, particularly of the Art Deco period from the mid to late 1920s through to the late 40s, early 50s. Prior to that, in the 19th century, brickwork, steel, or rather cast iron and wrought iron were used along with timber to build most buildings. But during the latter parts of the 19th century, the material technology was developing rapidly. Iron, for example, was being smelted with carbons and wrought iron, and then latterly at the turn of the century, typically from the late 1890s through to the 1910s, mild steel became more widely available. That was very much more usable. It could be cut, it could be bent, it could be rolled. Sections, eye sections such as this that we know as often called RSJs, and those sorts of things. That was widely in use. Concrete technology was developing in the second half of the 19th century. Monnier in France was experimenting with steel mesh, chicken wire basically, within concrete and making it span over gaps and not collapsing, using the benefits of the steel, which is good in tension, or the irons, which are good in tension, and the concrete, which is very good in compression, very strong when it's supporting weights. A guy by the name of Hennebeek, he then developed reinforced concrete to the point where he was using rod reinforcement in the more quickly curing cement concretes as opposed to lime concretes, which really wouldn't set very well, and to the point where concrete was being widely used in lots of different ways to at the end of the 19th century, and then in the early parts of the 20th century, people began to develop rules for the use of it, the amount of reinforcement they put in, the volume of cement with aggregate and things like that. So very much it was being developed, and people understood exactly how the material would work. I'm sorry, I'm clicking too many times here. Just a quick word about concrete floors. To start off with, concrete floors were just solid concrete with lumps of iron and steel in them to make them stronger. These were very heavy, very expensive, and people developed ways in which concrete could be removed and replaced with hollow block tiles, basically terracotta blocks, to create voids. That made the floors lighter, it made them cheaper, it made them more effective and stronger. So the technologies, as we were approaching the Deco building years, the Art Deco building years, they were becoming very much more knowledgeable about materials and how they behaved. So by the time we hit the Deco periods from the Paris exhibition, for example, onwards, concrete was very much a material that was being used in clever ways, in artistic ways, and the shapes and forms that the Deco buildings that the architects imagined, and people really appreciated the curved walls, the sweeping stairs, the cantilevers, which are exemplified in the Saltine Lido building. Excuse me. You can see here, for example, there is the cantilevers. You can see the slender columns that would be important in the overall elevations. The sweeping staircases, concrete stairs. This is a replacement stair, by the way, which I'll touch on later at the Saltdean Lido. So, just touching on three buildings tonight. Just briefly, two hotel buildings. Burr Island Hotel. I'm sure many people in the meeting tonight, in the talk tonight, know of Burr Island Hotel. It's famous, of course, for made famous by Agatha Christie. Lots of the rich and famous went there. It was the gay place to be. It was used as film sets. It was fun and entertainment, of course, in those days. But the island itself, this is the second hotel on the island. Prior to that, there was a couple of holiday homes, one of them being developed more of a hotel by a chap by the name of George Churgwin. And if anybody's been to Burr Island, you will know that there's Churgwin is quite celebrated within the hotel itself. But Churgwin fell on hard times with his two holiday places, and the land came up for sale on the island in the late 1920s, 1929. It was sold to a theatrical man, a man of entrepreneurial spirit called Archie Nettlefold. Again, a name that is celebrated by the Burr Island hotel people. And Nettlefold, he engaged Matt Dawson, the architect, in order to come up with a modern style building that would be a 60-room hotel for the rich and famous. Dawson decided that this was going to be constructed in steel frame and concrete. The island, as many would know, is cut off from the mainland twice a day, so materials, getting those to site was really quite tricky. And as a consequence, they were bringing materials across from across the causeway. But the concrete used, that was sourced locally. It was taken from the beach, and it was mixed with the cements. And little is known about the detrimental effects of chlorides, salts, and the like within the concrete mixes. That the shells they knew would help the concrete set, but it was the salts that were a real problem. And of course, the island is really prominent out in the channel, and it is very prone to harsh weather conditions. So this one with the clean lines using metal windows, green roofs, and the like, and it is a wonderful building. The date of 1929 on the rainwater hoppers is a little bit of a misnomer. It didn't open until 1931 in actual fact. Moving on, I think Kathryn is going to talk about Midland Hotel in Morecambe. Again, another fine example of Art Deco design. That was commissioned by the LMS Railway, designed by Oliver Hill. The brief to him was to create the modern masterpiece, and he was the building was completed in 1933. Two sweeping the central entrance foyer and the staircases. There's a lovely spiral staircase. You only see a little bit of it there. You can see it just a little bit in section at this point, and it's got these steps that sweep up that step up into this grand entrance area. just a little bit about the artwork in that as Ravelous and Gill designed the ceiling medallion, which depicts Neptune and Triton, I believe, the sea gods, and it's throughout the building. There's a seaside theme running through. Iconic seahorse design by another artist, Marion Dawn, and she was paid the grand sum of £20 in actual fact. And it's a design that is used throughout the hotel. It was used on the crockery. It was used on the around the bars and everywhere else. But again, it's the concrete building. Movement joints, movement in buildings occurs. Buildings are not living things, but they are the materials move around. And movement joints are very important when it comes to a building, and a long sweeping curve such as this, the various materials expanded and contracted as a consequence of the heat and the cold, and also the moisture conditions, and that led to cracking in the substrate in the main walls. And the cracks which were actually covered with a snowcrete render, the white render that we saw on the Bear Island Hotel. Incidentally, that was called the Great White Palace, the Bear Island Hotel. But the snowcrete then cracked because it was adhering to the walls, and the water then penetrated. And again, we've got these harsh seaside weather conditions really driving decay in the seaside buildings. The third building I'd like to move on to is the Saltine Lido. We saw some of the photographs of that earlier. Saltine, the village of Saltine is set in a valley. The two key buildings are the Ocean Hotel, which is slightly up the valley, and the Lido, with a wonderful swimming pool. The whole development was the brainchild of Charles Neville, a Canadian entrepreneur. He sold off plots of land throughout that valley for £100 a time or thereabouts, and would often have raffles to give the land away if to the winners. So very much a vibrant place, and in order to attract people to it, both the hotel and the Lido were constructed. Designed by Richard Jones. I believe that he was an architect who did a number of the Woolworths stores, and the instructions to him were to construct a masterpiece in streamline modern. And so this is in 1938, the building of the Lido was completed. Reinforced concrete walls, sweeping curved concrete walls. The walls are around 4 inches thick, 4 to 5 inches thick, with concrete columns and cantilever slabs and spiral stairs. The seaside, we've touched on it several times. The fun that people have there in the sun, but it's lots of the time it's wet and windy, so very harsh conditions for both people and the buildings. So in the Art Deco period, the methods used to construct the buildings were the modern ones. Concrete was, I've touched on that several times before, but the concrete tended to be used straight from the beach, as I mentioned earlier, and it was it locked in chlorides, and then the wind and the rain drove the water into the whole of the buildings, and they began to crumble because of the protection the concrete gave to the steel reinforcement. That was simply broken away, allowing the water and the salts to get into the reinforcement, which consequently rusted. Now, ferrous oxide, rust, that is a material that forms on the bare metal, and it will expand to around about 10 times the volume of the original parent metal. And bearing in mind that is under the concrete, that simply bursts the concrete cover away, such that more and more rain and salt gets in and further rusts the reinforcement and creates this decay. So Salty Lido, Life of Mixed Fortunes, opened in 38, just before the war. 1941, it was requisitioned for the war effort. It was the fire service moved in there. It gradually fell into disuse until 1961. Brighton Council became the owners and promoted it as a municipal building for swimming and leisure. The council, incidentally, then, and I'll go on to the next slide for this, the council then started a process of development, and over the years, and you can see how with the red lines and the various infills at different times, how it became more and more of a complex building. So really, they were trying to get too much out of it, and they were not able to maintain it, and it went into decline. And as a consequence, they were unable to afford the necessary maintenance, to a point where in 1995 it closed in a state of neglect. Basically, it was really poor condition. Various points, people wanted to do different things to it. Different people came and went. Companies went bust. But importantly, in the early 2000s, the Saltine Lido Community Interest Company was formed, and they had a strong leadership that enabled the pool, first of all, the pool to be rebuilt, and then funding from sponsors and grants and other interested parties enabled the work to repair the building to go ahead, to the point in 2023, the building was restored. So this is what the building was like in the just prior to the works that went on. You can see here. Sorry, I'll race along now because the time is running short. You can see how there's various barriers and blocked up. You can see the metal windows in here. Interestingly, in this bottom left-hand slide, you can see the timber doors. They were made by a company called Savian, and they used to make doors for aircraft hangars and were very busy during the wartime. You can see the levels of decay that are occurring here. You can see how things are falling apart, and the general effects of decay on a building. The Community Interest Company appointed a group to oversee both the designs in bringing the buildings back to life, and first of all determine what the problems were. So in building repairs, it is so important to understand what has caused the problem. Was it a foundation failure? Was it a material failure? Was it rot? Was it tree roots? There's a whole range of different causes, but it's important always to understand what the cause of damage is before you start a repair process, or even can think about how to repair it. So these are some shots of the building during the restoration process. You can see here that columns. For example, the very slender columns, you can see the reinforcement in those. You can see on the curved walls how there was delamination of the surface as a result of decay. This is part of the additional reinforcement that was laced into the walls. There was a process to clean the building up, aqua blasting all of the structural elements in order to remove the friable, the crumbly parts of the building, to expose it to back to the solid material, so they could begin the process of rebuilding, which you can see these two chaps here in that process. Basically, reinforcement was laced into what remained of the existing reinforcement, and then sprayed concrete was added to the walls layer by layer and trimmed into place. This is a detail from the structural engineers for the project, QED. You can see on this one the darker sections are the original concrete, and you can see this sort of jagged line. That's where they aqua blasted away all of the crumbling material. They added additional reinforcement in, and then this is a terrace slab, and introduced further reinforcement into the slab to make the cantilever part work. They also did work on the foundations as well. And when it came to the cantilever slabs, these slabs up here, and the external terrace slabs, there was a mixture of repairing of the existing structure, but also introducing modern methods in order to provide strengthening. The regulation authorities, the building regulation teams, they wanted, naturally so, the public to be able to access the external areas, but they were not strong enough with the original design. So those slabs that we saw earlier that cantilever out, they had to be strengthened by bonding carbon fibre plates in strategic positions to enable the cantilevers to work. So it's a mixture of modern methods, bringing old buildings back to life. The sprayed concrete is a more modern method of construction, and together, using different appropriate methods, we can bring these old buildings back to life very successfully with Saltine Lido. You can see here the sweeping curved lines. These are the original balustrades which were taken away, shot blasted, cleaned and repainted, and you can possibly just see a glass barrier that to meet modern requirements. You can also see how the original the graphics on the front of the building. Originally, they tried using LED lights, I believe, for this really fabulous what do you call it? Yeah, the Saltine Lido, of course. But these then became they went back to the old-fashioned glass tubes. They'd introduced different, more modern things with a nod to the Deco period. So these are lights that they had designed and added in, but with modern skirtings, of course. So I'd like to give my thanks to Derek Lever of Saltine Lido for all of his help in putting this together, and his team. But I would encourage you to go and see certainly the Saltine Lido, and if you wish a holiday in the seaside, please try Bar Island or the Midland Hotel. So there is the presentation. I'm sorry I've run over by about 5 minutes, so many apologies for that.
Thank you so much, Nigel. That's brilliant, and lovely to see a really good, positive, good news story there.
Very, very, very good news stories. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Okay, so over now to Kathryn, and whilst Kathryn's just loading her presentation, I will just give a little bit of background on Kathryn. So Kathryn Averby is a seaside-loving buildings historian, heritage research consultant and writer. Her specialisms include hotel and house histories, seaside heritage, and local history. She is director of historical research consultancy Archangel Heritage Limited, a fellow of the Royal Historical Society, and an associate of the Institute for Archaeologists. She has written books on seaside hotels, beach huts, and town halls, and co-authored Historic England characterisation reports on the seaside reports of Weston-super-Mare, Ramsgate, and Sheerness. Thank you, Kathryn. Over to you.
Thank you. And that's three very hard acts to follow, so I shall do my best. First of all, just for copyright reasons, could I ask that you don't take any screenshots or photographs of any of the images that I show today? They're here for the talk only, but if there's any that you're interested in, please get in touch and I can put you in the right direction. When first built, Art Deco seaside hotels embodied the spirit of modernity, style, innovation and leisure. But the ravages of time and changes in tourism trends means that they face ever increasing challenges and issues concerning upkeep and sustainability. I will look at the various fates of some of our Art Deco hotels involving disaster, renovation and regeneration, and then ponder how these iconic buildings can adapt to modern needs whilst retaining their character, style and enduring sense of place, or I shall attempt to. The thing with Art Deco seaside hotels, or any hotel, is that their very existence is due to social and economic factors. They were built because there was a demand or perceived demand for them. Their physical condition depends on funds being available for their maintenance and upkeep, from installing newer technology such as lifts and kitchenware, to modernising the decor, to restoring a fade exterior with a lick of paint or two, or even total refurbishment. This may come from investment, especially if a hotel is not an independent, but of course also from guest income, which is vitally important. All of these things are impacted over time by changes in holiday trends and changes in ownership as well, especially when a hotel becomes part of a chain. But also in the materials that these buildings were constructed with, issues, as we've heard there from Nigel. So hotels, they pose a huge problem, a cyclical problem, especially given their heavy physical usage, to say the least, with high guest turnover. Walls get scuffed very quickly, things like that, especially in public areas, carpets wear down, technology becomes obsolete, etc. So we'll look at a few examples with little snippets of their stories for some all-important context to get a flavour of just what we're dealing with. In this golden age of seaside holidays, staying away from busy resorts at remote, exclusive, all-inclusive places was an attractive prospect. The 1933 Saunton Sands Hotel in North Devon fitted the bill perfectly. This early ad there, top left, for the new hotel proclaims "far from the madding crowd." It was architecturally modernistic and simplistic, and culturally sophisticated and modern, with bars, dining experiences and lots of leisure pursuits: golf, tennis, squash, riding, bathing, surfing and even flying. And of course dancing to a really good resident band. After the 1950s, it slipped into shabby disrepair, however. But since 1977, although it has been in the capable hands of the family-owned Brent Hotels since 1977, as I've said, which has allowed it to remain as a pretty nice hotel. And they are able to modernise the hotel as it's needed, including some lovely spa facilities. And so what we have today isn't too far from when it was originally built. And I think this is one of our good examples. It's a good outcome. Next up, we have the Seaburn Hotel there, bottom left, completed in 1937. It overlooks Whitburn Sands. It was built by the Vaux Group and was the premier hotel in Sunderland for some time. Note the lovely curved brick detail there. Guests included painter L.S. Lowry, who holidayed there later in life, in the 1960s and 70s, always in room 104. Often he'd stay for weeks at a time. It was known for its high standards and amenities and was a focal point of many celebrations by the local community. It was acquired by Whitbread in 2000 and became a Marriott hotel when that lovely curve was obscured. It's now part of Britannia Hotels Group there, bottom right, which doesn't have the best reputation, but it is part of their full service hotel. So there is some hope. It has 3.9 on TripAdvisor reviews, which isn't too shabby, but it receives them, every now and again there'll be a bad review, but then there'll be a good review. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, really. When a hotel is no longer financially viable, it often becomes run down, and poor online ratings do not help the situation. Without financial input or desire to renovate, it will close and become derelict. The decline and fate of such buildings is painful to watch, especially when that dreaded fate follows the fate of fire. It seems we can't go a year or so without a blaze at a seaside hotel. The Palm Court Hotel opened in 1931 in Torquay, an Art Deco rebuilding of a row of houses. It was an instant hit and spent decades as a much-loved seafront property. Its large ballroom was frequently used for wedding receptions as well as dances, and it had somewhat of an iconic reputation. It closed in 2001 and was sold to developers who applied to demolish it almost straight away. Part of it remained occupied by a cafe. Old bedrooms became bedsitter, but it rapidly declined even further. In August 2010, the cafe closed and the developer went bust in the November of that year. And then there was a bit of a disaster when fire broke out just before 6:30 a.m. on the 18th of December in the same year. And not unsurprisingly, demolition followed, completed in 2012, and it was replaced with that very shiny block of luxury flats. So not a good outcome. There are only another casualty of fire, was the Grand Hotel on Sandown seafront in the Isle of Wight, a once elegant and glamorous gem of 1938. That's top left there and top right. In its heyday, this elegant hotel played an important social and economic role in Sandown and beyond. In the Second World War, it was the control centre for several buildings with hidden pipelines which supplied fuel for the Allied forces during their push into France following the D-Day landings. Post-war, many locals and holidaymakers used it for events and gatherings. It finally closed in 2012 and faced redevelopment plans, including demolition. In 2013, a local campaign group joined forces with the 20th Century Society to object, and it was saved. But it remained empty, and it's been subject to several arson attacks, including one in 2022, where fire forces from all over the island had to come and attend. In the same year, its owner, Nick Spiker, submitted plans. They were unsuccessful to restore it to its former glory, but to date, it remains undeveloped and unloved. There are only 2 hotels from this period left on the island, in addition to this one, the Shanklin and the Royal York Hotel at the bottom there. That's in Ryde, built 1937 to 8. It's a Grade 2 listed building, but it's also closed and in very poor condition, but some lovely features there. That stairwell is lovely. Onto the spectacular Art Deco delight of the Grade 2 listed Ocean Hotel in Saltdean of 1938. Advertising at the time asked, why go to the South Coast, Riviera? And the answer was, to stay in the sunny South Coast at the new and wonderful Ocean Hotel, of course. And why not? The hotel building and its 6 wings accommodated 600 guests all year round, with everything a modern holidaymaker could possibly want. Much was made of the continental Riviera style, from sea views, spacious roof gardens with sunbathing facilities to built-in bedroom cupboards. There were garages for cars, but guests could also use the taxi and bus directly from Brighton Station. In the Second World War, it's requisitioned, as were many hotels, by the Auxiliary Fire Service Training College, but they didn't look after it very well. Post-war, hope came in the form of Billy Butlin, who in 1953 had it converted to a successful Butlins, calling it the best investment I ever made. In 1972, fast forward a bit, Butlins was acquired by Rank Organisation, and in 1998 the hotel was acquired by the Grand Leisure Hotel Group and became the Grand Ocean Hotel. But it became less than grand when decline set in, both physically and reputationally, and it was used by quite a few Mr. and Mrs. Smiths. In December 2004, it finally closed and it was sold for redevelopment as luxury apartments by Explore Living. Although the pool was removed, many original features were retained, including the entrance and the fountain, and it now styles itself as a tranquil residential estate, and it has 5 modern buildings as well. In total, there are 235 apartments. So quite a success story because the building remains and it's recognisable in its original form. But in the most part, when a hotel is restored as a hotel, well, what then? What happens when the shiny new incarnation becomes older and shabbier? Well, we can ask this of the Midland Hotel in Morecambe, a fabulous streamlined modern building built by the London, Midland and Scottish Railway in 1933 as their showcase hotel, a stunning masterpiece of modernism intended to be one of the most modern seaside hotels in the country, incorporating and representing the best available in hotel design, materials and workmanship. Architect Oliver Hill designed a 3-storey curved building along the line of the seafront with a convex facing the sea, and it made the most of healthy natural light and sunshine. The roof was a solarium for secluded nude bathing, and he oversaw the interior design as well, everything from the furniture to chambermaid uniforms and bath plugs in the rooms. And I think Nigel went through some more of the details of the hotel itself. The hotel was intended to appeal to kings and commoners and attracted a variety of names and numbers. It was part of a boom for the town in general, with other Art Deco developments occurring too, not only for holidaymakers but also for the local community, and that's really important to note, including Woolworths, Burton's and Littlewoods, as well as amusements, an ice cream parlour and a long since demolished super swimming stadium and central pier. When the railways were nationalised, ownership transferred to the British Transport Commission Hotels Executive, who sold it in 1952. Over the next few decades, Morecambe declined in popularity, and with it the hotel. And by 2004, it was very forlorn, with mouldy green streaks on the exterior and flaking and peeling of the once polished marble effect cement work. But importantly, its splendour was kept alive by memories. In 1996, for example, the BBC produced an architectural programme called One Foot in the Past, in which veteran actress Dame Thora Hird returned to her hometown of Morecambe and talked about her memories of the Midland. Today, of course, we've got things like Facebook history groups for anyone to chat about memories, and we can share memories that way. That's just one way. In 2006, the hotel underwent a fabulous and widely publicised restoration and expansion by Urban Splash, and it reopened in 2008. But recently, there have been reviews of it once again descending into shabbiness. So the question is, what to do? I don't have the answer to that particular one. Now, I had thought the next mini case study was going to have an uncertain conclusion, but earlier this year there was some good news, which we'll come to. So this is the splendid Grade 2 Riviera Hotel. I think it's got to be my favourite. It's at Bowleys Cove in Dorset, and it's of 1936 and 37, designed by local architect Lionel Stewart Smith, who incorporated a striking modernist Spanish-inspired style that really sets it apart. Many facilities included a private beach, tennis courts, bowling green, stylish ballroom, central to dancers, of course, and a lot of social events were held there for the local surrounding areas as well as for holidaymakers. There was also an American bar and cocktail lounge with aquariums set into the walls. Really fancy. Despite some early hiccups, when it finally got going as a hotel, it was really popular. There were around 70 bedrooms, each with central heating and modern amenities, which was quite rare at the time. Leisure facilities and activities emphasise sunshine and the outdoors, morning exercises on the downs, an exercise room, sunbathing facilities aplenty, golf course, tennis, horse riding, and of course an open air swimming pool for bathing, diving and water polo, and also a children's paddling pool. The Riviera changed hands later in 1999 and again in 2009 when it was acquired by Saudi Arabian hospitality group Diafa, who gave it a £4 million refurbishment between 2010 and 12, updating facilities and communal areas and reducing the number of rooms to enhance comfort. But the Riviera struggled to regain its former glory. During COVID, it was used as temporary accommodation for homeless people. And in 2020, it was unsuccessfully put up for sale, and it actually closed in late 2022 after severe storm damage, especially to the roof. And its physical condition, guess what? Declined. By 2023, it was added to the 20th Century Society's Building at Risk Register with concerns over decline and neglect. Amidst rumours of demolition, squatting and criminal activity, the owners who bought it had bought it back in 2009. They're now entering into a full restoration. And I quote, "They have reaffirmed its commitment to restoring the building into a modern yet heritage-sensitive destination, preserving its Art Deco charm while updating the facilities for 21st century guests." There is some hope. Let's see if it happens. Let's all of us collectively watch this space. And finally, just a note to say that heritage, it's a huge, oh, there's Dame Thora here, there at the Midland. That's a still from that television programme I mentioned. Heritage is a huge part of a hotel's appeal, increasingly recognised as a marketing tool by owners. Britannia are quite good at this, for example. Despite their reputation, history features on their web pages and they have displays at their venues. Hotels have stories to tell, and they're so very important for local history. People have memories and stories of holidaying at them, and this includes the local community who use them for all sorts and to celebrate special occasions there or whatnot. It's central. And also very important, of course, and not mention them yet, the people who worked there as well. They will have lots of memories and stories. They will have been local as well as also seasonal workers. Restoration of hotels goes hand in hand with encouraging people to return to places to visit and stay, to celebrate a place's heritage, not just for nostalgia, but for the present. But it might have to morph into something different to retain landmark visual impact, as we saw at Saltdean. Also, does restoration of a building need to hark back to when it was first built? Are other areas less important? Eras less important? We have to think about these things. So what can we do? If time and money allow, visit hotels, whether for a stay or a meal or a drink. We can post photos on social media and spread the word at how lovely a place is. And that goes for buildings in need of TLC too. We can join local campaigns, even support from afar is appreciated. We can circulate petitions, write to MPs, oppose terrible planning condition applications. We can join the Art Deco Society and the Seaside Heritage Network. We can make the most of the tools we have available to us, which is mainly communication, using social media and the press to raise profile. And if you're an owner of, or a potential owner of such an establishment, look at how you can work with the local community as well. In these ways, a building might be able to survive and go from strength to strength and be open to all. But that's a maybe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. And yes, interesting story there about the Riviera. So as you say, one to look out for and see how that turns out. There we go, I'll turn my camera back on. Yes, lots of ways there that we can all get involved to do what we can for our heritage. So we have got, firstly, thank you so much to all of our speakers this evening. Wonderful, wonderful talks. And we're very fortunate to have you here and able to share that with us this evening. We have got a few questions that have come in. So the first one I can see here in the Q&A is, and I think Alan's perhaps started responding to this one, but is the Riviera building visible from Weymouth? I've seen a striking white building across the way from there.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was going to answer it as a text thing. Yes, you stand on the beach, and as long as there's half decent visibility, you can see it. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So we've also got a question here from Deborah. Is Saltdean snowcrete? So did they use snowcrete in Saltdean?
Not to the best of my knowledge, no. But certainly the records of it being used at Burr Island and also at Morecambe. It was one of the key areas that failed with the cracks in the snowcrete renders. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Nigel. We've got lots of thanks in the chat, lots of appreciation for this evening's talks. So if you are able to see that, speakers, please do take a look. We've got a comment here from Chris. Thank you, Karen. I got married at the Midland in Morecambe 2016 whilst it was under the English Lakes portfolio. Haven't been for a few years, but understand it has deteriorated in both appearance, oh dear, and services. Service perhaps over the last few years. Bit of a shame. Yes, unfortunately these things happen. See, anything else? If anybody has got any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat or the Q&A. Here we go. We've got another one from Adam. So what is the connection? What is the connection between neo-romantics like Revilius and the Art Deco style, please? Does anybody want to pick up on that?
I don't know is the straight answer. Revilius was the artist involved at the Midland Hotel. I mean, Kathryn, you may be able to jump in on this one, but I don't know. Building construction is more my thing than the arts, I'm afraid.
So I can sort of add something to that. So Revilius was the whole hotel was given to Oliver Hill, wasn't it? And he was sort of he had quite big networks of people and thought of the hotel as an entire work of art. So Revilius was one of the people, sort of upcoming artists, alongside people like Edward Borden. And interestingly, Revilius was working with his wife, wasn't he, Tirzah Garwood there. So I think it was about employing the sort of youthful, exciting artists of the day who that would sort of chime with the modern architecture. But Oliver Hill was very the sort of the different styles that he built in, a sort of Regency, a sort of neo-Georgian as well as very modern. So the relationships between all these people are really interesting. Of course, Eric Gill and everybody as well. That's why the Midland is so fascinating, isn't it?
I was a bit puzzled why people thought that they were in Spandau Ballet when I saw New Romantics.
Yeah. Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, they're
No.
the new romantics.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathryn, for adding to that. So we've got a question here from Helen. So the Yates building in Blackpool was recently sold for restoration by a restaurant owner, and Helen's contacted them and emailed several times, but with no answer. Is there anything that they can do or say to suggest, or that we can suggest, that might persuade the owner to let them photograph the restoration process and see the Art Deco details he's planning to use? Any thoughts?
I would suggest that they perhaps Blackpool doesn't have a huge amount of what one would consider to be architectural heritage, but what it does have, it does like. I would suggest they contact the planning department or the conservation department, well, I can't remember what it's called at the moment, and just say that they would like to contribute or, help out or form of words. That would be, I think, the best thing to do.
Thank you, Alan. There's a question here as well from Robin. Did not get where the Riviera Hotel was in Devon. Whereabouts is it?
Sorry, it's
Weymouth.
near Weymouth in Bowleys Cove.
Bowleys Cove. Brilliant, thank you. So another question, one from for Nigel here from Tiff. When you say concrete is taken from the beach, is it sand that they are taking, or sea minerals, sea dredged minerals?
Okay, so concrete basically has three, perhaps four main constituents. It is cement, of course, and water to make it liquid, but the aggregate is a combination of stone and sand. And many beaches, well, depends which beach you go to, of course, but many beaches have a combination of the sand and the stone. The difficulty is it's not very well graded, and to make a good concrete, you do need a good grading from a finer sand to a larger stone. Really for a good quality concrete. The biggest issue is the impurities in beach recovered aggregates. Lots of salts, lots of other things. Seashells are in there, and of course seashells were the calcium carbonate and seed shells was used in with Roman cement in order to have a good concrete mixture, and to enable limes to set. But yeah, it is these days, because we are looking for much higher strength concretes. It is there's far more technology involved, far more grading, far more quality assurance is necessary. One of the key things that is a little bit outside the Art Deco period is that system building did a lot of precast work, and they used to add chlorides to in the batching plant during the winter time in order to get the concrete to set more rapidly, so that you could get rapid through flow through the factories to get the concrete out into the prefabricated buildings. But that was a killer to the concrete. As soon as the concrete got wet, it promoted the chlorides to migrate towards the steel and to cause it to rust, and the concrete to burst from the surface. So chlorides are basically it's the chloride which is an issue, not just the grading of the aggregate, the sand to cement sand to stone ratio.
I put in the chat the flippant story that I'd heard, that we actually export sand to Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's true, isn't it?
I've had many chats with a guy at social events in Cambridge that prides himself. He's a very good marketer, I have to say. But David Ball, he does claim that he sells. I'll be careful how I say it. He sells sand to the Middle East. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Calls to Newcastle.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you very much, Nigel. I'm mindful of time, so I think we will have to wrap up, but perhaps one more question. And Mandy's asking if the panel know of any Art Deco seaside buildings that have been fundamentally converted to a new successful use, as opposed perhaps to restored for their current use. So would anyone like to share an example? Alan?
Well, one half of my garage was converted into a hotel. That's a fairly fundamental change. So the front part was the front part, the Westover Road part, was converted from a garage to a hotel, and then the rear part was left as the garage. What's its future will be, who can tell?
Anyone else?
Oh yes, there's the one at Salt. The one on the Tyneside coast, that is the 1920s bandstand that's been turned, and toilet that's been turned into a chip shop. Oh, what's that one, Kathryn?
Oh, I know. I can picture it.
Yeah.
It's not at Roker or somewhere like that.
It's somewhere at South Shields, isn't it?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway,
yeah.
it's a bandstand with a toilet underneath that's now a chip shop, or a fish and chip restaurant. Slightly odd change.
Thank you. Okay, on that note, then I would like to thank our speakers once again for your wonderful presentations, but also for sticking with us and answering those questions as well, which has been really helpful. We also have another event coming up in January, and I've popped a link into the chat. If you'd like to check out more about that. That will be an introduction to Art Deco with Dr. Emma Bastin on the 20th of January 2026, which isn't too far away now actually, at 7 p.m. And we'll be announcing the rest of the programme for next year shortly as well. So yes, and if anybody out there has got any buildings they're aware of they would like to raise with us, let us know as the Preservation Committee. Please do feel free. You can send us an email at preservation@artdecosociety.uk. And yes, we'd be very pleased to have details of those. So on that note, thank you very much again all. Thank you for joining us, and have a good evening or rest of your evening. Sorry, Kathryn.
I just wanted to say from us at the Preservation Committee, thank you very much to Kathryn and Alan. I'm really honoured and grateful that you could be here and do this with us, this sort of joint event. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for the
Yes,
invitation.
thank you very much indeed.
Pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Oh, hi Pam.